welcome to our PAX panel, Teaching Complex Board Games Made Easy. This is very exciting topics for us, and I'm Stella from Meeple University, and I am joined by Paul Grogan. Please introduce yourself from Gaming Rules.
Hi, good morning. My name is Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules.
We are teaching board games how to play on YouTube channels, on our channels. For a while, me and Taryn and then Paul. So we kind of like have learned from bits and pieces, you know, what we went wrong, what went right, and hopefully we can share you a little bit of those things with you. I understand that, you know, different people would have different style, which is just us trying to share how we teach. We're not going to talk about the obvious, like preparing yourself, knowing the rules, revise the rules and so on. But we, giving like those specific tips, especially teaching complex board games. Yeah. So maybe I should strike to Paul now. I probably talk too much. Paul, let's bring up the first tips.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you said there is about preparation. Now, there's a number of ways that you can go about learning how to play a game. And one thing that, I've done recently in the last, not in the last few months, but, in the last couple of years, is we've actually got a few friends together and we've learned how to play a game together from the rulebook. It's not what we're going to cover here. We're going to cover, you've got the game, you've learned the game, you've played the game, you know how to play the game. It's how you now teach that game to other players. And one of the things that I think is important at the very, very start is you should explain what the theme and what the setting is. Now, if you're like me, I like to play medium to heavy, complex Euro games where there's nothing more enjoyable than pushing little wooden cubes around on a board and then counting up the points at the end.
That's right.
And for a lot of those games, the actual theme doesn't really matter, but I think it is still important to set that scene at the very start. So in this game, we are all traveling across America, taking cows to Kansas in order to sell them to gain reputation. Whatever. It can just be a line, it can be a paragraph, whatever it is, but you do need to set the scene, I think, at the start.
That's correct. I totally agree. Especially the theme could often helps to understand the game. Most of the times the theme works, but there's also some other, dry Euro complex games that the theme that doesn't really help. So you're going to have to see, does it help, does it not, right?
Exactly. And that's where there's a lot of Euro games which are, technically, they are abstract games where there is a setting.
Yes.
And the setting doesn't matter, could be anything. And as you say, it absolutely doesn't help whatsoever with the explanation. So at that point, you just need to mention it briefly and move on. But where the theme does actually help with the teach, where the theme is reinforced by the game mechanisms, then it is useful to keep coming back to the theme.
Yes. But there are other games, it's more like, what do you call it, Ameritrash, that are really heavily immersed in theme, and that way, I guess it's not just that particular style, but they're also a game that's, very immersive.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those big discussion points, isn't it? That Euro games don't have any theme and the American style games do have theme. Personally, I don't subscribe to that train of thought. My view on the American style games is high level of player interaction, usually dice related, quite a lot of randomness in the game, whereas a Euro and luck, whereas a Euro style game is more about tactical choices and a very low luck element. In my opinion, whether a game is thematic or not is a separate scale. You can have a Euro game which is actually really thematic. Now that's less common, and you can have the American style games which are. You can also have American style games which aren't very thematic, and you can have ones which are thematic. So for me, whether a game is thematic or not doesn't really, it sits on a different scale to me as to what style of game it is.
Absolutely right. So we totally agree there. And Tarrant, my other half, also agrees with that sort of thing. We had this big discussion about this. Well, let's move on to the next one. So first we mentioned about the theme, but then we have to make sure they know the overall thing. So we start from kind of like the bird's eye view, looking down, the overall thing, the generic overall of the game, including the goal of the game, if that's possible. And I would say start from there before drilling down to little things. Do you agree, Paul?
Absolutely. The bird's eye view approach is really important. And One of the things which some people forget to mention when they start to describe the game is what the game is. And there's a few key pieces of information that you need to get out. Okay, you've given the thematic intro, you've told everybody what the theme is. The next thing to do is you need to tell people whether this is a cooperative game or a competitive game. Because 10 years ago, when I was demoing games, you didn't need to say this because cooperative games were not really a thing.
That's right.
Now, cooperative games are absolutely massive.
Yes.
And you need to tell the players at the start, you're all working together too, but there is only going to be one winner, and that's the one with the most reputation. Right. So straight away, they know whether they're working together or there's actually going to be one winner. And then tell people how you win the game. And that could be as simple as the player with the most points at the end wins, or the player first across the finish line wins, or the first player to build the pyramid wins, whatever.
Yes.
But within the first few minutes of an explanation, you need to get into people's minds how it is that they win the game, because everything else that you explain afterwards is all going to lead back to that point.
Absolutely right. It's kind of like working backwards in a way, I guess. So this is what you're trying to achieve, and then how you're going to achieve that, and then that comes next. I know that, as you say, it's not always possible to say, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when there's like a million way of scoring points.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that comes later.
I mean, just touching on that, you're right. There are a number of Euro games out there that are known as themeless, boring point salads, okay, which I personally love. And you're right. I think it's enough in those games to say the player with the most points at the end of the game wins, and there are many different ways you can get points. For example, constructing buildings, traveling here, going on adventures, killing the dragon. Just list off. You don't need to list all of them, but what you're doing is you're getting into people's minds. Okay, most points wins, and oh gosh, there's loads of ways of getting points, right? Oh, and if there is a particular icon like that relates to victory points, which is usually a shield or a special star with a number in it, say right from the start, you see this icon here, this means victory points. Every time you see that,
yes, I love that. Yeah,
it means there's victory points, and the players are suddenly looking at the board and looking at the cards and going, oh wow, there's victory points everywhere, and you're like, right. So again, get that information into their heads right at the start.
Absolutely right. Even like, oh, this is victory point within the game, and this is victory point at the end of the game.
At the end, yeah.
Yes, and things like that. So now we're talking about that. So at least they know where they're going. Now, how to get there, then we probably would. And okay, now that we've painted the pictures on the viewers, okay, or audience, this is basically how the game plays, and you basically moving around the board, for example, or racing or whatever it is. Now, the next step would usually on your turn, you would do such and such. Now, this is just generalization. I know that this is not always possible, but I remember also you recently taught us Hansa Teutonica, and you did that, and that's the way I love when got taught board game, when teaching board game. And it's not only these are the actions, but you don't have to explain the action in order. You could possibly skip it and then come back to it if, just to avoid to go in circle too much. Yeah. And,
I mean, this is one of those things. If a rule book or something like that, or even the player board that you've got in front of you has the list of actions on it, sometimes I don't follow those actions in order. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And a classic example is last week I taught a group of people how to play a game called Bonfire, new game from Stefan Feld. Okay. In Bonfire, on your turn, you have 3 different options. However, at the very start of the game, on the first turn of the game, you cannot do option 1. It is not allowed.
You're right.
Option 3, you can't do either. So actually, what I did in that game, I actually just started by explaining option 2.
Yes.
And then I came back to option 1 later on because, as I say, you can't actually do it. So I explained the actions in a different order in which they were presented in the rulebook. I'm not saying the rulebook was wrong, because the rulebook was actually right, I think, to present them in that order.
Yes.
But when you're teaching a game, if you start explaining people a particular thing that they can do, and they're looking at the board and you're like, well, wait a minute. I can hear what you're saying, but I'm looking at the board and you're talking about using a building. There's no buildings on the board.
Correct.
Right? So I mean, I might just say option 1 is using a building. There are no buildings at the start of the game, so we'll come back to that later on. But you don't need to go through things in the same order that either the rulebook or the player aid has presented to you. You will find your best way, and your way of explaining it, what you think is the most logical way of explaining it, might be different from what's been presented in the game.
Absolutely right. I mean, rulebooks I know you write rulebooks as well, and
I do, yeah.
That's probably why you say says on the rulebook, but then it's so different. Not always, but a lot of the times it's different when you do it in person and and visually, and I'll get to visual examples later, but that's absolutely correct. So there are times where you just come back to it because it just totally doesn't make sense to explain that. No.
I mean, one thing I do before, I mean, you mentioned Hansa Teutonica, because in that particular game, the structure of the game is actually really simple. Players take turns around the table, and it goes on and on and on until the end of the game, okay? But there are other games where there is a different structure to the game. So before going into a player's turn, we talked about the bird's eye view. I would then go one step closer, so the birds, fly down a bit.
Yes.
And I would actually then cover the structure of the game. So the game is divided into 5 rounds, each of which is divided into 3. Or the game will last for 20 turns. Or the game covers 4 ages, and within each age, whatever. So you basically go a little bit more down into the detail, explain the rough structure of the game, and then you start going down into detail later on. It's all just zooming in.
Yep, like explaining the table of contents, like this is going to be.
Yes.
Yeah, that's I like that as well. If it's a very simple game, you don't need to, but if we're talking about complex game here, and probably that's really necessary.
I mean, some of the complex games that we play have got 5 ages. Each age is divided into 12 phases, and each phase is subdivided into player turns, and you're like, whoa, what?
Yes.
But that's where having a player aid, and most games these days do come with good player aids, okay? But if the game doesn't come with a player aid, let's say you've got a game with 12 phases, make a player aid for the players, give them just a list with the 12 phases scribbled on a piece of paper and put it there so that people can look at it and go, right, phase 5. Phase 5 is all about sacrificing your workers, whatever. Okay, right, phase 5. And they see it on a piece of paper. Having a list, having things in order, which you can then point to and refer back to, helps keep people's flow and they know where they are in the game.
Absolutely right. Now that we're on the subject, I'm going to kind of move to the next one, which is the visual example of the explanation. So player aid helps when you're trying to explain something, you point at that so people remember, people can refer back to that, reference back to that. And also when you say you move and then you take this, if you give visual example, I think that worth more. It kind of sticks to people better than just talking about it.
Yeah.
You would agree, right? I think you've done that too on your videos and our videos.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned earlier on, I write and edit rule books for a living.
Yes.
I also create, like yourself, I create instructional videos. And what's really important in rule books for me is to have visual examples. So for example, you could say, if you want to go to the forest, you place your worker on the forest space and you collect 3 wood and you put it in your supply. Now, if you read that in just words, it's fairly clear. Place your worker on the forest, take 3 wood and put it in your supply. Okay, I've got that. However, if you have a little image of a little worker being placed on a forest and then 3 wood being taken from the supply, so you say, oh yeah, that's wood, I know what that is, and you see it moving with an arrow pointing to your player board, it's the visual examples and what you need. And it's exactly the same when we're creating videos. And some people don't do this when they're teaching a board game, and I think you absolutely should. I think you should pick up that worker and you say, look, I'm going to send my worker here to the forest. There you go. Oh, well, a lovely forest. Now I'm going to collect 3 wood. You point to the bank. Here's the wood, right? And then you put it in your supply and you show people where the supply is. So what they've seen is they've seen every step of it themselves. You just have to remember to undo that before the game starts, because I have spent many a demo where we've done that and I've explained the rules and I've used all these visual examples. And then we said, right, and we're all ready to start. And people have said, Paul, why have you got 27 gold, 3 buildings, and you're already halfway up the prestige track? I'm like, oh, yeah. So just remember to reset them when before the game starts.
Yeah, that happened to me too a lot of the times, or Taryn, I should say. Probably not on video, but when, in person.
Yeah.
So Next one would be, so we're talking about samples, talking about visuals. Now, part of this, why I put my points my tips is like that, is because part of it is that sometimes I don't remember, or maybe because the game is that complex that it's a little bit overloading. So I understand, I expect, not everybody's like me, of course, but if other people are like me, then I might forget something in the game, especially important thing. Now, I give example of me not forgetting to in anachrony. I don't know if you remember which part where you, what is the word? Is it ascending or going to the next one and then scoring points? So that's a very important step, and I forgot about it. I did not work towards that. So I think it is quite important, and Taryn is usually pretty good. If he learns the rules, he would remember, it would remind people, oh, by the way, we've got maybe a few more turns until this. And then I know you've done that too. And that really helps with people playing complex board games first time, and having that reminder that, because you've got a million things that you're going to keep track of. And then also, I have to do this at this point. And then you remind the people. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, going slightly off at a tangent, I have a particular demo method for teaching heavy games where we actually don't spend 45 minutes explaining all of the rules. We actually jump in and start playing and learn. But putting that to the side, if you are going to teach a full complex game, you are looking at anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes, possibly even more. I saw somebody once teach the entire game of Through the Ages before anybody started moving a piece. Now, I would never do that. It took them an hour and a quarter. So it was an hour and a quarter of literally listening to rules non-stop, and then they started playing. Personally, I think that's a terrible way of learning Through the Ages, but let's say you decide to do that. Let's say your group insist on knowing every single rule of the game, including what's going to happen in 5 hours' time, and they want to know it all at the start. Okay. So you sit down and you explain every single rule of Through the Ages. It's 1.25 hours of rules explanation. There is no way everybody is going to remember everything. And it is completely unfair for you 4 hours in, when somebody forgets a rule and says, what does this do again? He said, I mentioned that at the start. It's like, look, we're all human. We all have a limited capability of taking in information. Scientific studies have been shown, because I asked the cats and they told me, sometimes anything more than 5 or 10 minutes, anything beyond that, people can't retain. Now, there are certain people out there who I know, who I'm friends with, who I can teach a game and it would be maybe a 20 to 30 minute explanation and they'd be fine. They would listen to everything, they would take everything in. But normal human beings with a normal brain, they just can't take in all of that information. So yeah, I think it's really important, as you say, certain key things in the game, like in Anachrony, where you will evacuate to the to the city at some point in the game, and it won't happen at the start. It will happen probably 5-6 rounds in, and it is worth a lot of points. And each player has a particular goal that they're working towards. And I think it's okay in reminding those people, don't forget, at some point you're going to want to evacuate, and your evacuation condition is to have 3 red buildings, and you haven't built any red buildings yet. And it's a very fine line between telling them what to do and actually trying to help them learn the game, because some people might go, shut up, don't tell me, I don't want to know anything, you're telling me what to do. Whereas other players will be like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, thank you. I had forgotten about it. So again, people will react different ways, but it is a fine line when you're teaching somebody how to play a game. My view of the situation is, when I'm teaching people how to play a game, I'm also trying to help them learn it. And that means that I will, again, not tell them what to do, not really give them strategic advice, but I will remind them of really certain things. So if we're on round 7 of Tzolk'in and literally somebody's got no food and there's a feeding day about to happen,
you'll remind people.
I will remind them, because they might have forgotten. They probably have forgotten. But yeah, you've got to be very careful with some people, because they don't like being told what to do.
Yes, I know. And I really appreciate of, the teachers that reminds me what to do, because I would have forgotten about it. So
absolutely, yeah.
So I think we do have a similar teaching method, Paul, like with me and Taryn and yourself. So let's move on to the next one, which is questions. Now, this happens all the time.
All the time.
I mean, it doesn't happen when you do it on the video, but it happens all the time. Now, this is not, I'm not saying it's bad, but the way we handle it sometimes, I feel like it might break your flow of teaching. Yeah. But the quick way that we usually do it is we can just say, this is when we kind of like already know to explain this game. So we can kind of like anticipate what people are going to ask. So we can just say, this is this. By the way, I'm going to come back to this later, you know, after this section of the game, whatever. And people, I've seen people like opening their mouth like, okay. Yeah. And then retracted. Okay, that was my question. Or, you know, there are times where it's really relevant and then it's, I don't know, maybe I forget something and then people could ask like, yep, this is it. If not relevant at the moment, if it's better to be explained later, then like, okay, I'll come back to that. And I know you do that too. And that would help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about context. If you're in the middle of an explanation about something, and somebody points at the board and says, what does this icon do? And it's like completely nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Yes.
You have to politely say that you'll come back to it later. But if you're in the middle of explaining a particular action and you've explained that action, and then somebody points to an icon on that action, what does this symbol here mean? You're like, okay, that's a valid question at this point, because literally I'm talking about that, and you've just said, what's that? And I said, what that means is that when you do that, that gets you 1 victory point. Remember, this is the symbol for victory points. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned I'll come back to this later on, because we're talking about interruptions when you're teaching people how to play a game live. And you said this doesn't happen in video. And you're right. When I'm teaching, when I'm creating, you know, and you're the same, when we're creating our tutorial videos, there isn't anybody who walks over and says, what does this do? However, when we're writing the scripts for these videos, I'm already preempting the questions.
Yes.
So when you're teaching people how to play a game on video, even though they're not there, if you show something on screen that's got some icons, you can already tell that people are getting distracted. People see the icons on screen. So what I sometimes do in my videos is I will actually say, this bit here means something else, and I'll come back to that later on. So I actually do it in the videos as well, because I know the audience at that point in the video will be thinking of something. For example, I might say, oh, don't worry, if you don't have enough money, you can take a loan, and I'll explain loans later on, because I don't want to suddenly branch off into a 5-minute discussion about loans when I'm in the middle of a section on going to the market to buy carrots. Okay, so I'll just say, if you don't have enough money, you can take a loan, and I will explain the loans later on. So it's totally okay, I think, when you're teaching a game.
Absolutely.
To refer to things later on.
Yeah, it has to be, because you kind of like, you know, people minds would, as you say before, people mind would branch off and then, oh, hang on, how about the loan? And then you say, oh, we'll talk about loan later. But then you kind of like, yes, and then you don't want to break the, you know, the cycle of, what do you call it? The explanation of that, the flow, that's it, thank you. The flow of the certain things to get the understanding. And again, when you do a video, obviously no one's going to ask you questions. You can anticipate, you can list things so that you don't forget, obviously, you know, things could happen. You can forget if you don't list things to explain about a particular thing, and no one's going to ask you. So definitely important for that. It's very important, isn't it? I mean, it could be different teaching on video, teaching on, you know, on the conventions, which you have done a lot, teaching with friends, teaching with different type of people. And I want to know if there's any, you know, kind of like challenges that you encounter and how you manage that so far with teaching. Let's imagine this, a game designer's teaching, pitching it to the publisher, or you know, a publisher pitching it to people at the convention, trying get them to be interested and play. What do you think of that? Like, any tips, anything?
I mean, as I mentioned earlier on, teaching people how to play games at a convention, I have a particular method for doing that.
That's right.
I would say is not normally a method that I would use at home. And I used to say, I don't recommend this method for use at home. However, since then, this method can be adopted for use at home. It won't work with all groups, but for my opinion, when you go to a convention and you want to try out a game, sure, there are some people who will want a 45-minute teach and then they will sit there and play a 3-hour game, okay? And if you're one of those people, that's absolutely fine. But when you get a demo of a game at a convention, especially a busy convention, you have limited time, it's usually a noisy room, and the objective for me, not that I go to conventions as a member of the public anymore, but when I used to, is I just want to start playing the game. I want to get a feel of how it plays. I don't want to play a full game. I mean, even if I do play a full game, it's a learning game. I just want to see how it works, to know whether it's the kind of game that I would like. And it's a shame that that isn't more commonly accepted. As I say, some people go to a convention and they say, no, I want to know every single rule about it, and then I'm going to sit here for 4 hours and I'm going to play a full game of it. And it's like, if that's what they need to do to form an opinion of the game, then that's fine. But that opinion should be formed before that. So the way that I demo games to people at conventions, and I have been doing this now for 4 or 5 years, is that I will start playing within a few minutes, okay? Because this is a demo. You're here to learn whether you like the game or not. You don't want to listen to me talking at you for half an hour, and we're not going to play a full game. And it's your first game, so it's a learning game, so it's right off anyway, and off we go. And whilst that method does not sit comfortably with some people, I can tell you now, the honest truth, I've been using this method for the last 4 or 5 years. At conventions, I've used it hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times.
Yes.
And in all of those times, 3 people didn't like it. Because I'm counting. I am counting. 3 people said, I wasn't comfortable with this demo style. I would have preferred to know everything. The other hundreds of people all went, yeah, that was really good, because we just started playing within a few minutes and we got on with it. Now, in order for you to be able to deliver that style of demo, trust me, it takes practice. You have to know the game absolutely like the back of your hand. You need to have practiced the teach. You need to be absolutely, you can't just go into, I can't get a game off my shelf now and start using that method to teach people how to play games. It needs to be a game that I absolutely know perfectly.
Absolutely right. Because I've seen you, I'm pretty sure you taught me something as well at a convention. I can't remember what, but that's actually my preferred way of learning at convention as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to, well, as much as I like the explainer, but I want to try and get into it as soon as I can.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm playing against the explainer, and maybe, but it's not going to be a full game. So it's for those competitive people, it's not going to be like a full-on competitive if it's a competitive game. Cooperative is even different story. But just want to get into it and then just feel how it is. Am I going to like it? So I guess that would be the same thing with somebody, a game designer is trying to pitch their game to publishers. They're kind of like, if they want them to play with them, just like go and play and have a feel of the how the game plays, rather than this and this and this. I think I can see that would be a different thing. It would be the same thing, and that would help with the publishers to trying to understand how the game plays by actually doing it while being taught.
Yeah. However, just a side topic here, but I think that is useful. But having been on the other side of that, where I've been working for publishers and taking pitches,
right?
I remember when I was doing some work with one publisher, and we had somebody come in, and they literally wouldn't tell us anything about the game. They said, "Look, let's just start playing it," and we were like, "No. Can you just tell us a little bit about the game first?" He said, "Oh no, it's much better if you just play it." And it'll become clear. So there's a fine line in that. You can't just literally turn up to a meeting and say, let's just start playing. You do need a few minutes at the start, and then you explain some of the stuff. And then if a particular part would be better by explaining it, then by doing it rather than explaining it, then sure. But on the whole, certainly if you're pitching a game to a publisher, you can't just say, here's the game, let's start playing. You need to actually give a little bit of discussion at the start.
Because the publisher wants to know as well what they're getting into, what they're going to waste their time into for the next half an hour, an hour or so. I guess that's how, the appointment was made previously, or unless for walk-ins. It's like, hey, here it is. Like, you still have to pitch it kind of like properly. And then again, that pitching things, if you are on that other side, what would they usually say to you, Paul? Would they, pitch the overall of the game, like the feeling, the theme? What would they usually do?
Yeah,
what do you think works?
I think if we're talking about tips on pitching your game to a publisher, then I think start with the theme again. Again, just one or two sentences about what the theme is. Then you need to explain things like whether it's cooperative, competitive, number of players, play time, the complexity of the game. I mean, the complexity of the game might be apparent from what you've brought. If you've brought 2 decks of cards and put them on the table, we know it's not going to be an economic heavy Euro game.
Yes.
Whereas if you get out this massive board with 300 pieces on it, you already have a bit of an idea. But yeah, if you're pitching a game to a publisher, you need to start again with the bird's eye view, looking down, start with the theme, explain the structure, but you also need to say things like, expected play time, number of players, age, target audience for the game, and say, this is a game that we've designed for people who like, code names or something like that. And straight away, the publisher will then, I mean, you're right. A lot of this should have been done in a pre-meeting. A lot of publishers now will take submissions over emails first, and then will only arrange appointments with the ones that they've, it's like an interview process.
Yes.
And they apply for it. But other publishers will take walk-ins during a show. And therefore you need to get that information across at the start.
Absolutely. So, in the information of this panel, I did write about, whether you games pitching to publishers or you want to explain games at a games night. So hopefully this information has been useful. Now, we've talked this briefly before, whether in this video or before when I casually chat to you, regarding strategy and tips. So I know that this is, you brought it up before, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's one of those things that when you're teaching a game to somebody, you should not, and this is a general statement here, you should not be also teaching them the strategy. But there are certain times where it is, and what we touched upon earlier on is certain important things, okay? Like in Anachrony.
Yes.
It's a very important part of the game. You have this goal.
Oh, yeah.
This goal will be worth lots of points if you achieve it. You should try and achieve it by the end of the game, okay?
Totally.
For me, that's fine. But that is a strategy tip. You are telling a player there is a goal, it's worth a lot of points.
Yes.
Hopefully, by the wording that you've used, you've told them it's not essential. You can still win the game. Well, I don't even know if you can win the game, but theoretically, you could win the game without achieving that goal, but you've told them it's a lot of points.
Yes.
And I think that is important to do. There are other people I have spoken to, and I don't agree with them, but they think you should never say any strategy whatsoever. You should literally just tell people the rules of the game and not give them any help, no advice, nothing like that. And for me, it's a fine line. You definitely shouldn't say, oh, on turn 1, you really should go to the quarry and get some stone. Yeah, you should really do that on turn 1. No, you shouldn't talk about that in much detail. But if there is an overall, guide or something like that, I think it's fair to do that. Now, me and you, Stella, have the advantage sometimes, possibly more me, that when I'm teaching a game, I am also not generally playing that game. So, for example, this weekend just gone, I have run 9 demos of games, I think. It was either 9 or 10 demos of games, right? I didn't play in a single one of those games.
Right.
That gives me the advantage that I can give unbiased help, advice, strategy where wanted, where needed to all of the other players without being, oh, well, you're only saying that because it's going to benefit you. Oh, well, I think you should attack Tarrant. Oh, you should definitely attack Tarrant. And that's the advantage that I've got sometimes in the role of a teacher, in that I'm not playing the game. If you're playing in the game too, you need to be even more careful with that. Now, I have a friend, and he's a really, really nice guy. I don't like playing games with him. It makes me feel really uncomfortable, right? I love the guy to bits, and I'll play a 2-player game with him. That's fine. But if there is any more than 2 players in a game, he doesn't know the difference between advising and lying. So he will literally say anything at the table and give people advice, and he's doing it in order to manipulate them so that he gets a benefit. Now, if you're sitting at the table with a group of people and they all know the game perfectly, that kind of thing is fair game, absolutely fair game, and you can try and manipulate people and negotiate with them. But when you have new people at the table, and I'm telling this story not just as a funny story, I'm telling this story because if you are at a table and you are teaching people how to play a game, and one of the other players starts saying, I think you should attack Taran, it's a really good thing for you to do, when you know that actually what they're doing is to benefit them, that's unfair. Taking advantage of new players that are learning the game, and they are there to learn how to play the game, by influencing their decision to benefit you, I have a moral issue with that, which is why I can't play games with him. But
I understand.
As I say,
yes.
Playing a 2-player game with him, absolutely brilliant, because he can talk to me and say whatever he wants. Yeah.
I understand. I don't think I can imagine that, but I don't think I have met, or I don't remember that I have met somebody like that. Or I definitely would not do that. Taran would not do that. We would.
Yeah.
Our style, again, it's like we're trying to give some sort of a strategy, but not telling them what to do. Or we can just say, okay, I've got an example here. This is actually one of our friends teaching us Food Chain Magnate the first time. Now, have you played Food Chain Magnate?
Yeah. Okay. I have, yes.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you remember this bit, I remember him saying to us, if you, in the first few rounds of the games, so milestones are very important. So in the first few rounds of the games, you might want to be the last player, not the first player, so you can look at what other people are doing and then follow it so you don't miss out on milestones. And it stick with me, and that is absolutely true. And that has been my game every time I play Food Chain Magnate, is to look at what other people are doing, change my strategy, so I don't miss out on those milestones, because they could be really good. And I really appreciate him telling us that, because
exactly, it's a tip.
Things like that, like I wouldn't know, like heavy games, complex games. How would I know, without playing it? Maybe I would, but I'm not that genius, so I probably had no idea. So things like that, I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I do, because I enjoy getting together with friends and I enjoy playing a game. And because I take my role as teacher so seriously, I will sometimes, if I'm playing in the game as well, I will sometimes give people advice, or just not really advice, but just remind them of certain opportunities, even though it hurts me. Right? So, for example, if I've got my granary, okay, and my granary is filled with corn and it's got all of my resources in, but I decide to send my 2 guards off to the cinema to watch a film, and I leave my granary completely undefended, and another player is struggling for food, I would probably say, if you're struggling for food, my granary is here.
Yes.
And my guards are off watching the latest Harry Potter film. You can come and take it. And they go, oh yeah, right, thanks. And they go over there and they steal all of my food. I do that, even though it's going to hurt me in the game, because, as I say, my job, well, it's not my job when I'm teaching friends how to play, but I view it as my job, is I'm trying to help them learn how to play the game. And if they've missed the fact that I've left my granary wide open, I will point that out. Because if I'm playing that, I might have thought, oh, I'm going to leave my granary wide open and hope nobody sees it, right? Well, if you're playing a game with good players, they're going to see it. So, yeah, that's what I do. I not quite often, but if the situation presents itself, I will allow other players to do moves which will actually damage me, because, as I say, my aim there is to teach people how to play the game and help them learn how to play the game, not to just crush my opponents and win, which I don't normally do anyway.
Because you're more of a teacher. You kind of like embedded being a board game teacher rather than...
It is, and I've always considered I've always said I'm very, very lucky, right? If a group of friends come round and want to play a game, and I know how to play that game, but it's only 4 players and there's 5 of us, I will teach and they will play, and I will enjoy myself just as much, possibly even more, than if I was actually playing in the game myself. So that's me. I'm quite lucky in that respect, but it does give me the advantage that I can, as you say, I can focus on the teaching of the game rather than, trying to win.
Yeah, because for us, winning is not that really important, especially for you being a teacher is probably more important. Like if everybody enjoying the game, and because if you are the teacher and you explaining the games to everybody, you basically kind of like split. I don't know. If you know the games that well, that's probably okay. But if it's a new game, you're trying to learn, you're trying to get other people to learn, and then your attention's kind of like split between manning the game and thinking of your strategy. So it's for me, I can't do it. I definitely will do bad. Most of the times when I have to teach and manning everybody and then answering questions and then my own strategy. But that's okay. That's kind of like part of the teaching the game.
I'm the same. There are certain games that I can do it with.
Yes.
Like when we played Hansa Teutonica the other day.
Yes.
Because that's relatively simple. But there are other games where there's just no way. There's no way I could play in a game of Through the Ages and teach it at the same time. It's just too much going on.
It's complex game. So now, before we wrap things up, is there anything else? Any tips, for those who, anything that we haven't mentioned?
Well, there's one thing, and again, this is slightly off at a tangent, but I kind of want to mention it because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. If you are the person in your group who is the one who buys the games or gets the games, but you're not comfortable in teaching the games and you find it's actually quite stressful and it's a lot of time pressure, because some people say, oh, you've got to get the game, read the rule book again, set the game up, play a practice game yourself, go online, watch a video, all of that.
Yeah.
And your friends are coming round expecting you to teach them how to play the game. And it's actually a stressful experience because you're not very good at teaching games and you're really worried that you missed something. Don't do it, right? If you've bought the game and your friends are going to come round on Friday night to play the game, send them the link to the PDF and say, look, you're more than welcome to come round and play the game, and I'd love to play the game with you, but we need to share the responsibility of learning the game. It shouldn't be on you. And I think it's unfortunate that the person who buys the game is also the one who's expected to put in all of that work in learning it. So it doesn't need to be. Again, the PDFs for rule books for a lot of these games are available online, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to share that load amongst the group. But also, something I said at the very start, I did something a couple of years ago as an accident once. I'd got this new game in. I can't even remember what game it was, but this new game had arrived. I was really excited about playing it. My friends were really excited about playing it. And it got to the Friday night, and I didn't have time. I hadn't even read the rules, okay? I hadn't even looked at the rules. We all wanted to play it. So I mailed them all on the Friday afternoon and said, look, I know we all really want to play this game tonight, and unfortunately, I haven't had time to read through the rules myself. Are we all okay learning the game together tonight from the rule book?
Right.
And everybody said yes. And we had a brilliant time, right? I didn't do any preparation. And literally, I took the game, I put it on the table, we took the shrink wrap off, and we got it out, and we all learned the game together as a group. It took a lot longer than it would have done normally, but we've now done that half a dozen times since, because it was actually an enjoyable experience, us all working at it together, and everybody agreed, oh yeah, this is actually a fairer way of doing it, rather than Paul have to spend all of his time, learning how to play the game. So if somebody had said to me, is this a good method for learning games 3 years ago, I would have said, no, never do it. It's a crazy idea. And then we did it accidentally, and it's actually worked really well. So consider it, try it with your group. Even if you just play half a game and then put it away and say, right, now we know how to play, let's meet up next week and we'll all play it properly. Try that. It's definitely worked for me.
Why not? I mean, it sounds like as long as you set the expectation right from beginning, you don't have your friends expecting to come and then just play. Or whatever it is, whether you know half of the rules, whether you don't have time at all to learn the rules, whether you send the link to PDF, or whether you send a video of Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules teaching to your friends and then watch it together,
Oh, I've had people do that. I've had people say to me, after I've done a video for a game, and I'm sure it's the same with some of your videos, is literally said, look, it's game night tonight. I have sent the link to your video to everybody. And if they don't watch it, they're not allowed to play. And it sounds funny, but what you've done is you have removed that stress and anxiety from you in teaching them, and you've also saved time, because everybody can just turn up and go, oh, I wasn't really sure about this bit because Paul's eyebrows were distracting me, so I didn't listen. How's this work again? Oh, it works like this, right? And you're playing within 10 minutes. So yeah, if there is a video available or a PDF rule book, then share that within the group, and everybody should do their preparation when they can.
Just makes things easier and quicker. And I'm pretty sure we did that with what is it called? Tricarion, because it's with expansion. That's like a long one, and just helps for people to watch the videos first before so they have some sort of a general idea, and then obviously when it gets repeated, it becomes easier as well. So Paul, before we wrap things up, where can people find you?
I'm active on social media, so on Twitter my handle is Gaming Rules Vids. I'm on YouTube. All of my videos are on YouTube, which is Gaming Rules Videos. It's Gaming Rules Vids on Twitter, because I created the YouTube channel first, and then when I created the Twitter handle, it said, oh no, it's too long, you can't have Gaming Rules Videos. So it's Gaming Rules Vids on there. But all of my content, I do lots of different types of videos. They're all on the YouTube channel, which is Gaming Rules Videos. So
any other social media platforms, or just those?
I'm on Facebook. I have an Instagram account that I've not used for 2 months, because just I'm one man thing, so struggle to find time to do everything. So I'm active on as many places. I'm on many different Facebook groups, usually as just Paul Grogan, but I've got a company Facebook as well, and I'm very active on Board Game Geek, helping people with rules questions for games.
That's a good one. And we can be found on Meeple University on YouTube, also on the Dice Tower for the How to Play videos. And I've got Twitter, same with Paul. It's Meeple University is too long, so it's Meeple U on Twitter. Instagram, Meeple_University. Facebook, Meeple University, and Twitter. I did say Twitter, Instagram. Okay, that's it. Like too many. I've got Discord channel as well. Meeple University. I don't know how people find Discord. I'm not that, trained to do Discord. I don't. Neither do you. Discord.
Nope.
So hopefully this has been helpful for everybody. You know how to reach us. If you have any questions, anything, just reach out and ask questions. We're a friendly bunch, me and Tarrant. And find us on social media, and hopefully that has been useful to you. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.